really amazing. It's such a complex and fascinating subject. It really is. And I think it's because of the barrier to entry is so high. There's so much to learn. There's so much to dig. That most people barely scratch the surface of this stuff.
Right.
And it takes someone like you to really because it's like real easy to lean into the fun stuff. It's real easy to lean into the Anunnaki stuff, but the actual real shit that we know is 100% the accounts of people that lived back then.
Yeah.
That to me is as fascinating, if not more, than even we were made by aliens.
What's up, everybody? It's me, the one and only Hype2Preach, Joel Nieto, posting for the first time in a long time on my channel. But I just had to get it out. As a lot of you know, or probably seen, there's been this guy named Wes Huff going around making the rounds on all the big podcasts, Joe Rogan included. So I'm posting this little clip of him talking about why certain gospels are considered false and why they were left out of the Bible. Thought it was super interesting, and so got in a conversation about this stuff with my dad. So just thought I'd go ahead and post this video. So I'll let Wes take it away.
It's near the end. The last animation, if you can find it, we had a guy put this together for us where we looked at the studies, and there have been some really recent ones by a guy named Luc Vanderwey, who published this in, I believe it was at Cambridge. No. Birmingham University. He did his PhD on it, and he narrowed the gap within all of these literary bodies that talk about names. And we're able to pinpoint and actually show, so if you go to, right here.
Particular decades that they're writing.
A series of scholarly studies has shown that, though Jews were located in many places across the Roman Empire, people's names often tended to be geographically located. By observing literary and archaeological artifacts, a list of common names can be clearly identified. By narrowing down the most popular names in places that Jesus lived, traveled, and ministered, and by comparing these to the list from the studies, an interesting correlation can be seen. Just as we see today with popular names, a qualifier or nickname is often used. For example, notice that when Matthew lists the disciples in his gospel, certain names have a qualifier or nickname and others do not. Simon, called Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. As we would expect, the most popular names are those that have an added description. When we compare the most popular names in Judea and Galilee during the first century with names we see listed in key places in the biblical Gospels, we find that all the names with qualifiers match with what we'd assume if they were actually written in the time and place they claim to be narrating. In contrast, the Gospel of Judas only has two names that would fit, Jesus and Judas, but contains a host of other characters whose names match not with first century Judea or Galilee, like the biblical Gospels, but with names that were popular in Egypt during the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Consider how difficult it would be for someone living outside of the locations and times that these events took place to get the right names with the right qualifiers. We have 4 biblical Gospels with 4 different authors, and yet each gets this test of naming frequency and attribution right every time. A test and standard that the non-biblical Gospels simply do not pass.
That's interesting.
So we can use
that is so interesting,
isn't it? So
that's so interesting. It totally makes sense too.
Yeah, so it's the levels of methodology that we can use to find internal accuracy. If we really want to figure out, okay, where was this written? And is it coming from early eyewitness testimony? We look at something like the biblical Gospels, and they fit the bill for something that's written in first century Judea. But if we look at something like the other Gospels, they're doing things like the Gospel of Judas does, where other characters are coming up with names that are almost either non-existent or very unpopular in places like Judea and Galilee, but are popular in 3rd and 4th century Egypt. So what can we then conclude from that? Well, this is being written in 3rd or 4th century Egypt.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really amazing. It's such a complex and fascinating subject. It really is. And I think it's because of the barrier to entry is so high. There's so much to learn. There's so much to dig. That most people barely scratch the surface of this stuff.
Right.
And it takes someone like you to really kind of, because it's like real easy to lean into the fun stuff. It's real easy to lean into the Anunnaki stuff but the actual real shit that we know is 100% the accounts of people that lived back then.
Yeah.
That to me is as fascinating, if not more, than even we were made by aliens. Like
Yeah.
all of it is bizarre. And the fact that we're still going over these texts thousands of years later is also fascinating.
Yeah.